facilitating. And our guest speaker this morning is Phil Centers. Phil, take your mask off just for a minute so people can see your full face. Okay, there.
Hi,
And
everyone.
yeah, and Marie Claire is our music minister. She's off camera, but you'll enjoy hearing her. So we're going to begin this morning with a reading from the Science of Mind magazine. And Margie Bourgeois will do the honors.
If I can get my mask off. I'm reading from the uh, yesterday's reading, which is very pertinent to today. And the name of it is Each One Different. To work effectively as an agent of change in a pluralistic society, it is necessary to be able to connect with people different from oneself. And that is written by Beverly Daniel Tatum. Life has set the stamp of individuality upon everything, from a blade of grass to a person. And that was written by Ernest Holmes. Each one of us is different. Each one of us is unique. The creator of all life has made it so. Whether I explore those differences is up to me. Whether I learn about different countries and cultures is my choice. I get to choose whether or not I build relationships with people who are different from me. In our human experience, all these differences can be uncomfortable. Sometimes we perceive differences as dangerous and threatening. It often just feels easier to connect with and congregate with people who are similar to us. Today, entertain the idea that everyone you come into contact with is different from you for a reason. Consider that each person is truly a unique individual with a gift to deliver to you. In your mind, think, what a cool version of God this person is. Or remind yourself, let me be curious how God is expressing in this person. Seek out people who have lived in different places. Befriend someone who speaks a different language. Plan social events that take you to different communities and expose you to different cultures. Break out of your comfort zone and step into God's creative zone. I'm going to have everybody respond after me, and I'm just going to is one sentence. So I'll read the whole thing, and then we'll all say it. I am willing to expand my comfort zone and build cross-cultural relationships. I am willing to expand my comfort zone and build cross-cultural relationships.
Thank you, Margie. So we'll have a little time of silence now. You can reflect on that or do whatever process helps you to be centered and fully present in the moment. And I'll do the little chimes to signal when that part is finished. Bring your awareness back to this time and place. I think we just experienced a miracle. It's a rarity to have a silent meditation at New Thought when a rooster doesn't crow. They must be respecting the energy. So we are now going to, those of you that arrived early, you've already been enjoying the music, but for those who just arrived or just tuned in on the live stream, we're going to now enjoy a musical selection from Marie Claire. Go for it. Mm. Beautiful. I kind of felt like I was in the ocean, like an ocean of sound. Ooh, beautiful. So I'd like to wish you all a good morning, and I'm kind of curious, is there anyone here for the first time ever at a New Thought gathering? Is there anyone here who it's the first time since we closed and reopened? Ah, okay. That makes 3. Okay, well, I'm really happy to have you back. It's like, I think it takes a certain kind of just courage or determination the first time, because even if you've been here many times previously, it's a little bit like going into the unknown. That's always a little bit true with New Thought, but it's even more true now. a few weeks ago, when Marie Claire was facilitating, she did something quite extraordinary. And I'm going to try to do it in a few minutes, but I don't know if I'll do it quite as well. We have been thinking that we can't do the self-introductions around the room because we're more spaced out than usual. But when we don't have, we've got things set up for the benefit of the live streamers that can't see it. We're using the entire lanai. And so the chairs that normally would be in a cozy little circle around Phil and me, they're all, some of them are far away. But this morning we have kind of a nice small group, and I think I might be able to do what Marie Claire did. I thought, oh wow, she must have super hearing, because she was able to hear the voices and sharing accurately even from the people in the far back. But I won't have quite as big a challenge today. But before we do that part, I would like to just give a little introduction to New Thought. Our mission is to provide a sanctuary of aloha for the nourishment, development, and evolution of each individual's unique spiritual path. Our history is we evolved from a small religious science church that was incorporated in Kona in 1971. And we date our, quote, birthday from that incorporation. We have held Sunday services continuously from that time, previously in Keaho, and since 1999 here in Kealakekua. Our connection to the wider world beyond this lanai, beyond Kona, we are affiliated with the International New Thought Alliance, which is not a church, but it's an umbrella organization that brings together groups and individuals who share certain common beliefs and attitudes. Among these shared attitudes and ideas is this one, from which we got our name. A new thought embodied in consciousness produces a new condition. And that's attributed to Judge Thomas Troward. INTA also includes many unity and religious science churches and centers for spiritual living, and a few independent groups like us. You can visit our website, www.newthoughtcenterofhawaii.com, to learn more. So that's who we are collectively. Now we're going to, I'm going to invite you to say your name and respond to a question. And what you say will only be included in the live stream if I repeat after you, because we aren't allowed to pass the mic around. So only the mics that feed into the computer can be heard by our invisible friends out there. You have the right to pass, of course, but say your name at least for the benefit of the people who are here. Okay, so here's the question. One of the ways we define ourselves at New Thought is that we are weaving a lay of love. And that came from a visioning retreat quite a few years ago. Patty was there. I was there. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the idea came from Patty, since she's our lay minister. So weaving a lay of love. So what I'm going to ask you to reflect on is, what leaf or flower would you want to represent you in this lay of love? My name's Pasha, and I'm choosing the Kula Gardenia. Marie Claire Rose. Yearling Sunflower. Brent Soursop Leaves. Margie Lilac. Krista Hibiscus. Ah, we got 2 hibiscus. You can be different colors. Okay, Pat's red. Krista, what color are you? Okay, we got a red and an orange hibiscus. Okay, well, we've already got lilac, so let's say peonies and daffodils for Erin. She couldn't decide between the 2. Jatayu, Morning Glory. Patty Pikaki. Terry Cosmos.
Phil, I think the lily is my, or not the lily, the lilac is also my my favorite fragrance, but I'll go with the bougainvillea
Okay,
in memory of Nan.
we have a bougainvillea from Phil. Well, thank you all. Did I do one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I started it off. Oh, yeah, I had the Kula Gardenia. That's right. Oh, wow. This would be a very beautiful lei we have created with our imagination. It's obviously, it's got to be a haku lei. It's not a simple one. Well, let's sort of let all those images and fragrances sink into our consciousness while we enjoy another song or piece of music. And she doesn't want to be on camera. Diane's puzzled about the hands, fingers wiggling in the air. It's our new thought modification of the International Sign Language for applause. So I guess it's the wiggle fingers part we didn't create, but the raising them high to express greater enthusiasm that's sort of like a standing ovation. Well, now we get to a delightful part of our service that we set aside for the sharing of miracles and ordinaries. And we call them miracles. There are many definitions of miracles, especially. Okay, is this better?
It's not the the mic isn't going through the speakers, but we can hear you. I just are the remote folks probably can't hear you.
Wouldn't you know, it's right when our tech person stepped out. Uh, Okay, so I will use this one. So this mic is actually here for the sharing of miracles, so it's appropriate. So miracles that sort of take us by surprise, they delight us, they excite us, they give us a inspiration. Um, but they're also ordinary because we hope that as we're practicing our spiritual principles, these happenings become more frequent in our lives. And so the floor is open now for the sharing of those special happenings and realizations. So normally we would take the mic to you that are sitting on the lanai, but in this situation, we invite you to come stand in front of this mic. It doesn't bite, and you can adjust it to your height. Okay, so be brave. Brent.
Tasha, do you want to start us off with the miracle?
Well, as a facilitator, I try not to. I rather create the space. Great, we've got one. Okay, thank you, Krista. And you can lift your shield.
Fine. It's cool.
Okay, then
Aloha.
I don't think they'll hear well out in
Can you hear?
live stream land.
Aloha. So very nice to be here among you in this sweet, beautiful, sacred space. Life is a miracle. Hard to choose which one. But I have one I wanted to share. I'm here through the grace of God and through the generosity of Tony Vaughn, one of your members, because my way back from India in February, she received guidance in her own meditation that she should invite me to come and stay at her place to house it while they were in Nevada. And I was on my way to California, and I thought, oh, that'd be kind of nice. Stop by and, spend some time with Tony in Hawaii until I go to California. And of course, I stopped by and they left, and then COVID hit, and we both ended up finding ourselves stranded in our respective places, though I feel I got the better end of that deal. And every time I tried to book a ticket to California, it kept getting canceled. And my family and friends were saying, stay where you are. Why are you coming to California? So that was just a miracle in and of itself, is that I was ending up getting a place to stay in this beautiful, lovely land where we have so many more freedoms than many of the people around the world. Despite having to move chairs around or whatever, when I look at what's going on, in particular in California, I just am so very grateful that God tapped Tony in her meditation and said, invite Krista to come stay at your place. Little did either of us know it would be for 6 months. But since I was going to be here for a while and it became clear that, weeks were turning into months, I just needed to do something. And in California, I was involved with a service project where we would go down once a week and do what they call a bridge meal. The soup kitchen, Franciscan based, would serve about 200 people, and our group, interdenominational group of about 10 people, would come together and do the meal for the day that they were not operating. So we had like on Saturday, a little handout lunch and breakfast and whatnot for them to be there for Sunday when the other group was closed. So there were only two of us. My friend was also over here from India 2 weeks after I arrived, and Tony was gracious enough to let her stay there as in the house as well. And we were both like, we've got to do something. So we went to downtown Kona and we just started making up burritos and chips and some papayas and whatever we could put together and afford. And we started passing out some of the lunches because we found out that a similar thing existed here, that there was a group in downtown Privateer Cove in Kona that was doing meals every day of the week except for Sunday and Monday. So we thought, okay, well, we'll take on a Monday and we'll do what we can do. So that's actually been going on for 5 months now. And week after week, you start to get to know people and some of their experiences. And a couple of weeks ago, unlike the other program where you go to a specific location and they're all lined up there, I would end up driving around finding kind of the little hidey holes where people hang out. And so in this one week, we had a certain number of lunches. I think we do about 18 because that's just, in terms of budget, what we can afford. And when I say we, there was another friend of mine who now is here from California. Got out in Northern California just before the fires hit. Guidance just told her, you need to go, and there was a space open here in Tony's revolving hotel of Aloha. And so she's been here for the last 3 weeks. So we went out together, and we're down to like the last little container of the meals. And I always do a little prayer. I said, please, there's an Indian goddess named Annapurna, and she is the goddess of food. So I call on Annapurna when we do this and say, beloved Annapurna, please, with all of this bounty and this gracious gift you have given us, giving us the opportunity to give to your children, please show us who you would like us to feed. And so we're down to the one lunch, and I'm driving one way, and I see somebody with his little cart of recycled cans, walking the other way. So I make a U-turn and come around, swing by, and recognize this man. And he goes, "Oh, I have to tell you a story of God." I said, "Okay." So he says, "You won't believe what happened." He had just come back from the recycling center, and which was just a few blocks away from where I was. And he said, I didn't get quite as much money from the collection as what I was hoping. And I was just asking God, oh, I could really use a drink or something. It was a very hot day. And right at that moment, this car drives by and rolls down the window and says, "Hey, brother, could you use some water?" And hands him a bottle of water. He says, "Yes, yes." So then he's, traipsing along, and he says, "Could you use some tobacco? Me and the brothers, we could just use some tobacco. It's been several days." And sure enough, somebody drives by, and they've got like a packet of like tobacco, and sees the guy and say, "Hey, can you use some of this?" And this is both times driving by and handing right out of the car. So then, I come along and hand out a meal. And so he had a whole bunch of stuff he was carting and trying to manage and having difficulty. And where his kind of base is over by the old airport. So I just gave him a ride down there. And there were 2 or 3 of his brothers that were there that we had already given some lunches to. But he then says, "Oh, you got to hear the story about, his friend." His friend was saying, "Gosh, I could really use some pizza." And then this guy, Lloyd, goes, "Father, we need pizza." And he says it with such confidence. "We need pizza." And the end of this, sure enough, all these people, they deliver. They drive by, somebody had come by and says, "Hey, I got some extra pizza. Would you like some?" This is all within minutes. He hands him the pizza out the door. So I say to him, I said, "Lloyd, sounds like you've got the idea of how the universe works." I said, "So what are you going to ask for?" He says, "Well, I only want to ask for what I need." Now, this is a guy that's homeless, right? He's thinking of pizza and tobacco and bottles of water. I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He says, but I could ask for bigger things. I said, yeah, you go, Lloyd. So one of the things I just want to share is that it's really humbling to me to see the people that I've met that we might call street people, but I call them in India, there's a term sannyasi, and that is those who have given up their attachments. And I have really been humbled by the people that I have met there, who I really come to find have a lot to teach me about detachment, equanimity, and most recently, really believing in the power of prayer and miracles. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Wow. That was a great story. Well, we have time for one or two more if someone else is motivated.
Hi, everyone. My name's Brent. My miracle is being here and being able to find a home through members of New Thought. Do you want me to speak more? Steve and Shayna, who are listening to this live stream, hey guys, really appreciate you. They are housing me right now. They're in Aspen, Colorado, and just wishing good intentions for them. It was a miracle that Steven is okay after his bicycle accident and is recovering well and is giving me good feedback of what I can do to improve the audio. I'm going to remove this mic after everyone's talking to mitigate distraction. And yeah, I mean, just miraculous that we're all healthy and well, and that we can manifest things that we need all the time. There was a spider that was here for about 4 weeks in a row, and I don't know the lifespan of spiders, but either the spider is on the other side or it has found a new home, and that's pretty miraculous too. So thank you guys.
I just want to say that I feel like it's a miracle that I'm here. I have a concern I'm putting in with this, asking for thoughts and prayers for the area in Louisiana where I raised my 3 children for 47 years. They are having 2 storms, hurricanes coming in, and Lafayette, Louisiana, just yesterday or Friday had someone shot in the back by the police. And so they're protesting and having hurricanes. And I lived there by myself after my kids uh, left, grew up and went to other places. And so I was by myself. And I'm very thankful that I'm here, but I have a concern for all of my friends and the really wonderful people that live over there, but they're facing quite an experience right now. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to move on. Thank you for that and for the miracles we're holding in our hearts and miracles we hope for. So now I have the pleasure to formally introduce today's speaker. Phil Centers is the Executive Director of Kona Pacific Public Charter School. It's a Waldorf-inspired school in Kealakekua. Oh, thank you, Brent. Phil has been a student of Rudolf Steiner and his cosmology for 40 years. So this is Rudolf Steiner in case you hadn't noticed the picture. So Phil, not Rudolf, was a Waldorf teacher in private and public Waldorf schools for many years, and most recently he's been a school leader in international schools and public Waldorf charter schools. Since 1985, Phil has been a member of the pedagogical section of the School of Spiritual Science, which is the research branch of the Worldwide Anthroposophical Society, headquartered in Dornach, Switzerland. This talk will provide a short introduction to Steiner's life and an overview of the key aspects of his philosophy, cosmology, and finish with a brief description of the practical movements that have evolved from his spiritual research, which is what most of us are maybe more aware of, such as Waldorf education, biodynamic agriculture, and anthroposophical medicine. Whew,
Well done.
okay. So I'm going to relocate Phil so I don't have to keep my head turned sideways. And when it's getting close to the time to wind up, I'll come back to the facilitator
Okay.
chair.
So good morning, everyone. I'll try to remember to speak into this so folks can hear me from a remote distances. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to talk with you about one of my teachers, Rudolf Steiner. There's a picture of the Mahatma. We can certainly call him. Mahatma is a kind of a contraction, two words, Maha meaning great, Atma meaning soul. Steiner in his spiritual science would say that's not entirely accurate. Atman in the anthroposophical conception is the most future of the spirit members that we are developing. It's not a soul member, but if one takes Atman in the sense of individuality or friend of humanity, certainly Rudolf Steiner is a great soul, a great friend of humanity. So in order to have a sense or to understand Steiner, one really needs to have a sense of the reality of the spiritual world, because Steiner really from the beginning of his incarnation as Rudolf Steiner really dwelt in that reality. And so just to give a little sense of that, I'd like everyone to just close their eyes for a minute. And in the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, some of you may be familiar with, after Mary, the mother of Jesus, and her cousin, probably her aunt, Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, had escaped from Israel and the persecution or the being hunted down by Herod and his henchmen. And they had safely arrived with their sons in Egypt, and they were being, at the beginning of their instruction there in some sacred groves in Egypt, they were kind of marveling at their deliverance. And one of the teachers there spoke to them and said, it's not really that strange. This was Elihu. He says, there are no random happenings. Your being here in this grove with your sons was preordained from ancient times. So really, one could say the first sense of that reality of the spiritual world, I think everyone here wouldn't be here unless we all felt very strongly of the existence and the reality of the spiritual world. But to live in that reality, if we can have that sense that our being here at this place right now together was ordained from ancient times, if you will, that this is not that no encounter we have is random, that every encounter, however brief or in depth it is something that was planned long ago. So that is something of the mystery of eternity and of time, that aspect of the spiritual world. And then the very next day in that grove in Egypt, Elihu said to them, to Mary and Elizabeth, no person lives for themselves alone. We are all connected with each other through energetic strands or bands. And some people call this the eagle's emanations. But if we can have that sense, in a way you could say this is infinity, that if we can have that sense, and And another way of saying all living things is to say all energetically real things, because there are things in life that aren't real, but the mineral kingdom is real. So the mineral kingdom itself has a life of its own. So if we can have a sense of the mineral kingdom beneath us right here, and the reality of that, and the energy that is upholding us here, and the strands that are connecting us to the plant world around us. This is one of the most incredible places in the world for that energy. And the insects and the animal world that we're connected with, that are whispering to us right now and giving us some, sharing their goodness with us. And of course, the energetic strands that connect us with the human world commands most of our attention, both waking and sleeping. That is a very compelling world that we're involved with, of course. And then, moving from that into the invisible worlds, our personal angel. Do we have a real connection with our angel, with death, who is our friend our whole life, and will eventually knows exactly the moment when it will usher us into the next dimension, and the other spiritual beings surrounding us, both progressive and regressive, that are really determining in a large degree our experience and the experience of humanity and the world. So this whole realm of the moment, the present moment, and the strand that connect us to the different realms of the world. How much are we really aware of that as we walk our walk every day? And then the third aspect of this really is that we've come together and we're exchanging something here, something really precious in a way. And so whenever there is an exchange, there's something that's created for the future. In a way, it's kind of a promise. It's a contract. It's a seed. You could call it all of these things. And so if we can have a sense that the future isn't something that is going to happen later, the future has already happened. And it's raying in to create the present moment, just as the past, the ancient times are right here, are happening right now. And so what is that seed that we're creating through this exchange that we're doing right now? Can we have a sense of how this is going to bear fruit into the future? And so this is just a taste of what Rudolf Steiner, from the beginning, was his reality. He lived into that. One other thing that I wanted to preface the talk with about Rudolf Steiner has to do with natural science. Rudolf Steiner loved natural science, and what we would call, just today, we would call science. But really, science means knowledge. Natural science is the knowledge of the natural world, the physical world. And Steiner, his whole life, kept abreast of the latest developments. Of course, he saw a lot in his life. We have seen incredible developments in natural science in our lives as well. But there's a certain naivety to the natural scientific community, where they acknowledge in their genius that there is a dimension of the universe that they just they haven't been able to access. And they, in a certain way, kind of an arrogance, say, they call it antimatter or dark matter, instead of just acknowledging there's spirit and there's matter. And the spiritual world, it's not antimatter, it's not dark matter, it's spirit. It's the spiritual world. That is that hidden dimension that they acknowledge, but they somehow have a hard time calling it for what it is. And so really the spiritual world is just as knowable, at least most realms of it are just as knowable as the physical world, much vaster than the physical world. In fact, the physical world is just one manifestation of the spiritual world. And according to Steiner, and of course all spiritual masters, the spiritual world is completely can be known in clarity. It isn't something that it has to be known in a kind of a mystical way. So I wanted to just start this kind of overview of Steiner's life with that preface, because Steiner lived in the reality of the spiritual world. He was born in 1861, February, as the clouds of the Civil War in the United States were forming and about to burst. Steiner came onto the scene far away in what is now Croatia, then was part of the the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. He was born in a very poor family, and as a young boy, he had his kind of, at least anecdotally, we know of his first experience of this living in the reality of the spiritual world. He was visited by his aunt, and his aunt didn't visit him from coming in on a train or a stagecoach. She came, she had just crossed over, she had just crossed into the spiritual world through death. And, when she crossed over, there's, the mystery of really how things are known, that quality of the strands that connect us that I mentioned before. And she somehow knew exactly where he was. He was a bright light shining, and she came and visited him. And as he did many times in his life, he kind of helped her to cross over, to let go. And he spoke of this to his mother, and she chastised him for talking about such things. Said, don't, you shouldn't say such things, about make things up like that. And sometime later, the letter came. There wasn't a telegraph in that remote part of Europe where the aunt lived, but sometime later, the letter came announcing that the aunt had died at exactly the time that Steiner had this encounter with the aunt. So uh, that was a little taste of how could that have happened if that wasn't something real. Now, Steiner learned to keep these experiences to himself, of course. Kind of if you know the Harry Potter stories, being a wizard in a Muggle world, it's not good to draw attention to yourself. And so, in fact, he did something which was quite interesting. He really devoted himself to studying the physical world. So his parents knew, of course, that he was an incredibly intelligent young man, and so they moved a few times, and finally, his father was a station master, had started off as a game ward on the estate of a count. These 1800s Europe, and then became a station master for railroad, and eventually moved near Vienna so that Rudolf Steiner would have access to the best schools in the area. And he was accepted, even though he had no money. He had an academic scholarship to the Vienna Institute of Technology, and there he studied physics, he studied chemistry, he studied math, mineralogy, botany, zoology, so the minerals, the plant world, the animal world, and also audited courses in literature and philosophy. So everything in the world interested Steiner. And he became known as really one of the up and coming great scholars in Europe. And so much so that he was invited before he had even made a name for himself, or, in the sense of publishing papers, or like he was invited at the end of his 4 years at the Vienna Institute of Technology. He was invited to come. They were gathering Goethe scholars, and I'll talk about Goethe in just a minute. They were inviting Goethe scholars from around Europe to come to Weimar, Germany, which was Goethe's home place, to work on an edition of Goethe's collected works in celebration of the 150th anniversary of Goethe's birth. So I want to talk a little bit about Goethe. But before I do that, I want to say that at this time, which was around the time when Steiner was 21, 22, Steiner made a momentous decision. And this is not known in the biographies that you'll read about. But this was relayed to me through some of his students that I had the pleasure and the privilege of knowing. And that was that Steiner decided when he came of age as an adult that his clairvoyance that he had kind of inherited, he called it atavistic. Today we might call it epigenetic, something that you inherit from your kind of bloodline. That this, as much as it was useful to him, maybe a hindrance as well, that this really had no usefulness to humanity. For this reason, because in our age, the age that we're in right now, that Steiner would say that we've been in since around the time of Joan of Arc, 1413, he gives as the start of this a developmental age of civilization, that in this time, unless it's something that is accessible to every human being, that it is really of no worth to humanity. And so Steiner came to a monumental decision. He decided to erase his clairvoyance. And you could say, well, how can you do that? How can you erase something that was that came to you that is just a natural gift? Steiner had discovered something that he applied to this. He had learned that alcohol erases clairvoyance, and this is a law of spirituality. Alcohol kills clairvoyance, and so in the taverns of Vienna, he drank hard liquor, and he erased every trace of his clairvoyance. He gave it up, and he wanted to be able to regain that clairvoyance in a way that every human being could do if they followed the same route. And that was a real risk that he took. What happened if he couldn't do that? And so I think that is one of the sacrifices, and one of the great risks that Steiner took in his lifetime, was to give up that clairvoyance and then try to regain that through means that all human beings could follow. And that's where Goethe came in. Goethe, in the United States, we pride ourselves as being cosmopolitan, internationalists. We feel that we know a lot about the world, and we do, rightly so. I was made aware of how little I know about the world when I went international several years ago, and one of the experiences I had was when I was in Saudi Arabia. I was a leader of a school in Saudi Arabia, and I looked over the textbooks that were there in the school, and they were talking about Islamic leaders, the greatest scientists in the world. They were saying in this textbook, and I had never heard of this person. I thought Albert Einstein was the greatest scientist in the world. They didn't mention Albert Einstein in these books, but they mentioned a number of people I had never heard of. So it's like, wow, a whole world, over 1 billion people on the planet have their own cosmology, have their own great leading figures in history. I've never even heard of them before. And you could say the same thing is true in Germany, that in the German world, I was privileged to do part of my Waldorf training, a year of my Waldorf training in Germany. And you learn that there is a whole world of the German, and of course, Germany, over the centuries has been a leading force in the development of culture, world culture. With all of their composers, if you think of the list of world-class composers from Mozart to Beethoven, etc., the scientists, the philosophers, you have a Leibniz. How many of us know anything about Leibniz, who discovered calculus at almost the exact same time that Newton did? How many of us know that? And he was a great philosopher as well. And just the pantheon of German geniuses that have come and graced the world. And in a way, we don't know much about those folks, even though the Germans, they want to know everything about for instance, the British philosophers, Berkeley and Hume. Steiner studied those folks quite in depth. But really, the shining star out of all of those, in a certain way, for the Germans was Goethe. And there was Goethe was, I think the reason for that was because Goethe really embodied the German folk spirit, if you will. He was an artist. His great work that he's known for is one of the great works of world literature, which is the work called Faust. And that's if you haven't studied that or haven't read that, it's well worth reading. And he was also a great philosopher and a scientist. Goethe developed a scientific method that challenged Newton's scientific method. And in a certain way, you could say it's better than Newton's. If you study it, it's better than Newton's scientific method. Newton's method, of course, is to develop a hypothesis and then to find evidence to support it. And Goethe said, there's something flawed about that, because already by setting a hypothesis, you're already influencing the phenomena. You are, everything is influenced by our activity. And so Goethe's method of scientific discovery was to watch quietly. And he has this famous kind of saying that if you just watch quietly, Mother Nature, and he really spoke in these terms, will reveal her secrets to us. She wants to reveal her secrets to us. She doesn't want us to impose her will on that. She'll let us, and she'll, some things will be revealed, and of course, how amazing the technological world that has been revealed by the Newtonian scientific method, but it's flawed, and we can see that the unintended consequences from that research are plaguing us. And so, um, one of the anecdotes of Goethe was one of his applications of that method was every night, just before sunset, for 40 years, he went out and stood and looked at the sky. He didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. He just went out and looked at the sky. Next night, for 40 years, he didn't miss a day. And after 40 years, he could come out and look at the sky and he could tell you exactly what the weather was going to be for the next 3 days. Now, with our $1 billion satellites, we can tell you what the weather will be for maybe the next 7 days to some degree of confidence. But how much more meaningful would it be that you can say, well, I need to know what the weather is going to be here where I am the next 3 days. I don't need to know more than that. And he knew the lawfulness of the weather had revealed itself to Goethe through that activity. Goethe also developed a color theory that challenged Newton's color theory. And to this day, Goethe's color theory is used where color is used practically, for instance, in the theater arts with lighting. Goethe's color theory is used, not Newton's. So this was Goethe, and Steiner became a Goethe scholar and was invited to go to Weimar. And through Goethe's method, if you will, he was able to redevelop this clairvoyance. And I'll talk about that in a minute. He was able to redevelop that clairvoyance that he had given up. And now it was a clairvoyance that was really connected with the whole universe. It was a clairvoyance that connected him with all of humanity. And so during that time in Weimar, he spent 8 years there. And from 1888 till 1896. And he got his PhD while he was there. And he wrote his first kind of 3 books, but the one that's the most popular is known as The Philosophy of, in German, you would literally translate it as The Philosophy of Freedom. But Steiner said in English, and again, everyone learns English, almost everyone in Germany learns English, that's their second language, because they know how important the English speaking world is in the life of the world. And so he said, when it's translated into English, don't call it the philosophy of freedom, because the word freedom in English has a connotation of freedom to. Any word in English that has dom, freedom, dominion, free dominion, wisdom, wise dominion. It means you have this freedom to have dominion over something. You have that in the tale of Adam and Eve. You have dominion over the animals and so forth. And that's an interesting way of looking at it. But Steiner really felt that the freedom he was talking about, the German word Freiheit, really meant freedom of, freedom to. So he said in English, it should be translated as the philosophy of spiritual activity. It's in spiritual activity that we are free, that we are not bound to the physical world. Because everything in the physical world, because of how it's constituted, it kind of leads eventually into a kind of a dead end. And you have to come out of that and into the spiritual world to be truly free and unlimited. So in that work, Steiner said, is the seed of everything he did from that point on. And it really comes down to a very basic thought. And I want to share this because this is so crucial to understanding Rudolf Steiner and his work. And that thought is this, that when we look out into the world as we're constituted now every age has had a different reality. But as we're constituted now, when we look out into the world, we see the world as perceptions, and we see the world as split in a way. Now we can say we understand that the world is kind of becoming more and more split right now. We have human beings, we have brothers and sisters who are in a different factual bubble, are in a different factual reality, and it's happening. It's more and more every day. It's like, how could you look at this? I see a tree, you see an elephant. How's that possible? I see a tyrant, you see a savior. how is that possible? But that's not the split that Steiner was talking about. He's talking about the split between our perceptions that we have, and concept. So concept really meaning not theories, but the lawfulness behind the perceptual world. And one great example of this is when we see a rainbow. So when we see a rainbow, we see that beautiful spectrum of colors, but we don't see with it the way we're constituted now. We don't see the lawfulness. It took us a while to figure this out, that a rainbow always happens away from the sun. And every one of those droplets is kind of a refraction of 23 something degrees that's hitting that droplet and coming in at a certain angle. And that's the lawfulness of a rainbow. Now, that Steiner, in the philosophy of spiritual activity, said that what he discovered through applying Goethe's methods of knowing the world, that reality of the lawfulness of the rainbow is never split from the rainbow. It's only split because our organism, the way our organism is now constituted, not just our physical organism, but all the parts of us, it splits the world. So the world is split because we're split inside of us. And so in order to remove the split between our percepts and our concepts, and that has happened for a very important reason, that this is the way we're constituted right now, because something had to happen in this time where the world appears split. We have to develop something that we wouldn't be able to develop if we always just saw the concept and the percept together. And that's an incredibly important thing, that we have a certain freedom that we have now in this time of human evolution, that we can develop something because our organisms are constituted the way they are. And so Steiner says that you need, and the Course in Miracles says exactly the same things. Jesus in the Course in Miracles says the altar has been defiled. The altar is this inner sanctuary, and that the ego wants us to do everything but look where the Holy Spirit has placed the atonement. The answer for the split is always placed where we need it. And so the ego wants us to look everywhere for the solution for salvation, except where it actually is. It wants us to be afraid to look within, because we will see that the altar has been defiled. The world has been split. We are split. We are fragmented. But right there where the split is where the atonement is. And so in a way, looking within, and Steiner talked about in the philosophy of spiritual activity, thinking about thinking, that we have to use our thinking, which is usually comes from here through our sense organs and goes out. But we need to move back a level and use that thinking to look at our own thinking and see the blind spots. And then we'll start to unify that split that has happened inside of us. That's the key to the whole enchilada, if you want to say. That's the key to everything that Steiner did from that point on. And he says, everything is contained in my philosophy of spiritual activity. So now Steiner moves forward. It's 1896, and he starts looking at the world with this newly developed clairvoyance that he's gained. And he comes to something right at the end of the century, at the end of the 19th century, that kind of staggers him. Because in a way, he has avoided this his whole life up to that point. He's 38 years old. And that is the being of the Christ. And, he hasn't avoided the being of the Christ in a way, but he is, religion has been something that just didn't have any appeal to him. But as he is now looking at the universe in his new clairvoyance, in a way, the Christ makes it so he can't avoid. He's like, you have an appointment with me. You can't avoid this appointment. And Steiner comes face to face with the Christ being, and he has his famous saying. He says, I came face to face with what he calls the mystery of Golgotha. Now, Golgotha was the garden where Christ's passion took place. And so in all of Steiner's teaching, he refers to the mystery of Golgotha, which by that he means the mystery of the crucifixion and the resurrection altogether. That mystery is the key. Well, what he discovered, he says, I came face to face with the mystery of Golgotha, and I saw it as a divine mystery of knowledge, or a festival of knowledge, you could say. So really what he saw was that whereas this understanding that the split in the world comes is inside of us, the portal to the portal to all true knowledge is that mystery of Golgotha, that event of the crucifixion and the resurrection. That it's only through going through that that you come into the real world, and everything opens up through that place. Now this was a revelation, obviously, to Steiner, and at the same time he saw a couple of things that were really historically very, very important. He saw that in a way, the book of Revelation, which he hadn't been a student of, that really in chapter 12, the book of Revelation, that was taking place right there at the end of the 19th century. That in a way, in almost a backwards way. The second part of that talks about the archangel Michael throwing Satan to the earth, and Steiner saw clairvoyantly that that happened in 1879. He didn't call it Satan. He named that being Ahriman, and that in a way that, of course, once Ahriman hit the earth, that everything electronic, in a way, all of the electric wires around the planet, that's Ahriman's nervous system, if you will. And that also in the book of Revelation, this thing that we know from Hinduism, that's called Kali Yuga, a 5,000-year period of darkness, ended in 1899, according to Steiner's clairvoyance. And that in the book of Revelation, prior to Michael throwing Satan to the earth, that the mother is giving birth to a child, and that the dragon is coming in to try to devour that child. And that's really the birth of this new age in 1899. And of course, everything that happened in the 20th century, the world wars and the like, were this attempt to kind of swallow the spirituality that is being birthed right now in our time. So with these developments, Steiner knew that he needed to go public with his research. He went first to a scientific society called the Giordano Bruno Society. He felt that he owed it to the scientific community, which he had kind of been a member of up until this point, to speak about his spiritual research first there. It was dead silence in the room. They never invited him back. But he said, I had to do that first. And then he went to the only people who would listen to him, which was the Theosophical Society. And they, of course, the Theosophical Society had been founded in 1875 in New York City by Helena Blavatsky and 14 other members, and very beautiful tenets that they developed. So Steiner became the head of the German branch of the Theosophical Society. Now, his work from 1902 to kind of when he started going public with his lectures, the results of his research, until 1923, really is kind of roughly divided into 3 7-year periods. The first period was where he kind of developed the theoretical, if you will, not theoretical meaning abstract theory, like you're guessing at something, but really just the framework of kind of like the text in the Course in Miracles is a theoretical foundation of that. So he developed that theoretical foundation with the other important written works that he came. The first one was called Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, How Is It Achieved? And in that book, and I have a reading list for everyone, in that book, he really outlines the exercises that he used to develop the clairvoyance. Anyone can do it, including lucid dreaming. And then the other 2 really important books were called Theosophy and then an occult science, an outline. I think the new translation is called an outline of esoteric science. The word occult has kind of gotten a little bit of a bad name for it. So those 2 are kind of part 1 and part 2, Theosophy and esoteric science, of kind of the spiritual reality of the human being in Theosophy, and then cosmic history and the spiritual dimensions in occult science or esoteric science. So that was the first phase. And then in 1909, really the second phase work, which was the artistic work. He developed a new form of dance called eurythmy. You might have heard of that. It's used in Waldorf schools worldwide. He started building the theater. They decided to go into Switzerland, which was obviously a neutral country, and they created this amazing building. It's considered to this day one of the great masterpieces of modern architecture. It's no longer standing. It was burned down. It was arsoned in the New Year's Eve, 1922-23. Great tragedy. But then they rebuilt the second one on the grounds of the ashes of the first one, which is standing to this day. And that's the international headquarters of Steiner's research. And that building is called the Goetheanum, the building of Goethe, in honor of Goethe. And so they built this building during World War I when they could hear the bombs across the border. And a group of people from all countries were there in Switzerland building this kind of almost by hand, crafting this building, the Goetheanum, which was both a theater for artistic work. It's the only place in the world where both parts of Faust are performed. Um, and all of the artistic work came out of that. In Steiner's cosmology, there are really 7 arts, which if we had more time, I could go into all of that, but we don't. I know I have to wrap this up. And then the third part of his work, really, in a sense, from 1916 to 1923, was the practical aspects. He said from the very beginning to the German people, and it was a little bit tricky because he wasn't born in Germany. He was a German speaker, but he was born in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. But he said to the German-speaking people, if you think you're going to win this war, you're out of your minds. There's no way historically, because he could see clairvoyantly what was really going on behind the scenes. And so when people saw that his was it predictions? Not really, but his indications about World War I came to pass. Then they said, "Wow, there's really something to this guy." It's not just stuff that the Theosophists have been talking about for for these years. And so people from all walks of life, doctors, educators, farmers, and so forth, came to Steiner and said, "Look, Germany is in shambles. How do we renew our vocation?" And so all of this practical work arose out of that last part of his work. And then really in 1923, he sensed, I think, that his time was coming to an end. And so he used that last 2 years of his life to kind of wrap things up. And he did what he knew already back in the late 1890s, that along with having these revelations about the what was coming down for humanity, he saw that his mission really was to bring a true teaching of reincarnation and karma to humanity. And at the same time, he saw spiritually that the other people who were supposed to bring other aspects of what he called spiritual science, that the other people really hadn't woken up to their mission. And so he really had to carry all that. In a way, he was like a one man show. He had to carry all those aspects for all those years. And then at the very end of his life, he gave about 80 lectures, which are contained in 8 volumes called Karmic Relationships. And those are classic kind of research into different people's historical figures, incarnations, and the law of karma. By following these individualities from one incarnation to another, you start to learn what the laws of karma are. One thing I wanted to mention that I didn't was that is important, that around 1912, the leaders of the international theosophical movement, at that time, Annie Besant and Charles Leadbeater, were announced that there was a world teacher that was they had discovered. This was a young man named Krishnamurti, who had moved to the Theosophical Center in India, moved right outside of that center. And Steiner said, with his knowledge of world history, said, "No, this isn't actually accurate. There isn't the need of another world teacher. The world teacher's already come." And so there was a break. He was dispelled from the Theosophical Society, and the German section, which was the biggest section in the world at that point because of Steiner's original research. And the other thing which I should mention is that the way this worked was that people would come to Steiner, and he didn't come up with all of these about 300 lecture cycles over the years. People would ask him questions, Dr. Steiner, what's the spiritual meaning of beekeeping? Or what's the spirit, what is the, hidden meaning of this? And he would say, well, let me research that, and let's meet in Paris in 4 weeks, or let's meet in Copenhagen, or let's meet in London. So really he was the first, he had the first kind of, if you will, deadheads, like the Grateful Dead. They would follow him around Europe. I would call them live hearts instead of deadheads. They would follow, and it was a real festival. They would say, gosh, Dr. Steiner's going to be speaking about this subject in Paris in 4 weeks, and they would get their tickets. And then, of course, there was always a stenographer there, and they would hear for the first time revealed secrets of the cosmos that humanity had never heard before. So um, uh, that's an introduction to Steiner's life. I'm at time, and there's so much more we could talk about, but those are the main things I wanted to share. Yes. I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you. Sorry. Buddha and Christ. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So actually, I'm sorry, we don't have time to have the questions within the time frame, the normal time frame of a New Thought service.
I can
But-
stay after if people want to have questions. Yeah.
I believe that you've piqued our curiosity enough. I think we're going to have to invite you to come back again.
Sure.
But also I feel like, maybe from the very beginning when Phil described what he thought he wanted to share with the New Thought community, when the board looked at it, we kind of felt like, this is not going to fit in one service. So I invited him to create a reading list so that each of us, whatever aspect of this we're most interested in, most drawn to, we can do some of our own research before his next visit, and then we can ask really terrific questions. And also, he's a member of, he lives in Kona. Of course, he's rather busy being the director of the school, but he's probably still would be willing to respond to some people's questions. But we do need to wind up today's service. So thank you so much,
Thank you.
Phil. That
Yeah.
was really, really extraordinary. And by the way, thank you all. I skipped the little mask spiel at the beginning of the service, but I thank you for putting up with these limitations that we have to endure for everybody's health and safety. We're probably facing a change, and I think most of you are aware of, that things have gotten pretty hairy in Honolulu, and they already are under some restrictions that are extreme, like no more than 5 people can gather at one time. Because we're all one state, it's going to have some impact on us as well. And Harry Kim submitted his proposal to Governor Ige. Governor Ige has to approve it before it takes effect. So we sort of slipped under the wire for this Sunday anyway. But we aren't really quite sure how it's going to affect us in the coming weeks. So I think that makes this service even more special because there's a chance we won't be able to invite members of the public to come for a while. But it's like what Bill said at the beginning, it's not by chance, those of us that are here today. This is what's happened in the past week. It's not nearly as bad as Honolulu, but for those of you that get West Hawaii today, there's this certain lawyer that's taken upon himself to keep track of these numbers. So last Sunday, they had documented 145 cases of COVID on the Big Island. This Sunday, 192. So that's more than 45 new ones. But we will continue. It will just be a different method of delivery. If we're not allowed to invite you to come here in person for a while, we're still going to have the speaker that's scheduled and the musician that's scheduled, and we'd very likely just gather here, a very small group of us, and do the live stream from this lanai. So you would just be joining us in consciousness, but not in the body. Just wanted you to know that may be coming, and maybe not. But the next thing on our program right now is we're having some offertory music by Marie Claire, and you are invited, if you are willing and able, to instead of the offering bowl coming to you, you come to the offering bowl, which is right here. Actually, it got moved a little bit. It's supposed to be right here. So one at a time, when you see an opening, you just walk up, and somebody primed the pump already. Okay. So here's what we've got coming up. Next Sunday, August 30th, Davina Marr will be presenting. Her topic is Cultivating Safe Conversations, and music by Mahina and Randy. Their group is called Aloha Moon. We are scheduled to celebrate the New Thought birthday, which is since 1971. I believe that makes 49, which will be a Zoom celebration with details to come. And Fall Equinox with Dawn Barnett is on the calendar for September 20th. That's what we know so far, what we think we know at least. And we have weekly classes at the center. Those accommodate 10 or fewer people, and you're supposed to call ahead to in, inform the instructors. So I'm confident that we will be able to continue those weekly classes even if the 10-person gathering limit prevents us doing the Sunday. So that's gentle yoga from 5 to 6:30 with Maria Mann. And Thursdays, Kona Living Aloha Group facilitated by Davina Marb. So do contact those leaders if you plan to attend so that they can be certain that we're respecting the limits. Event, we have one monthly event coming up fairly soon on Tuesday, September 8th, the Safe Conversations Practice Group. If you've been curious about the Safe Conversations thing, since that will be the topic of Davina's Sunday presentation next week, it's a good chance to learn about it if you haven't previously. And then there are these monthly gatherings related to that. I have 2 special announcements. Well, one I've already alluded to, just a little bit of uncertainty about the future. So please check the New Thought website or read your newsletter next week before coming here to find out whether we are in fact able to continue meeting in person. And the second thing is, it's about our YouTube channel, and this will become more important if we do have to take a break from in-person meetings. I believe we now have 52 subscribers. The channel was just created in April, I believe. If we get up to 100, then we get to choose our name. At present, the name of our channel is UCM7GL4KX, etc. So, but once we get 100, then we can name it something that relates to New Thought, and it'll be easier for people to find it and remember it. So you can, there at the end of any of, well, it's in our publicity that goes out by the newsletter and the website. And if you just go one time to that channel, you can see there's a way to subscribe. It'll also mean you'll get a reminder when a live stream is impending. So I would like to finish by thanking some of the people that have made this service possible today. Some of us are doing visible functions, our presenter, our musician, and me. And if you're here on the lanai, you can see some of the others. Terry is our head usher. Patty's our lay minister. And we have Brent, who's been our tech person for our main tech person for the past 6 weeks. Thank you so much, Brent. And then some of the people you can't see that are more behind the scenes, we have our Nilani is doing extra work cleaning for us to have everything be super sanitary. And we have Pomaikai, who's our webmaster and editor of our e-newsletter that helps us all to know what's happening. And Nigel has been assisting, I hope he's still willing today, with the cleaning and sanitizing after service. So thanks to all of those people and anybody I may have, well, who did I forget? My husband, the bulletin board minister, and the person who puts out the New Thought sign every week. So yeah, so it's a good team. So thanks to all of you. And we are going to have a closing prayer in lieu of a closing song today. But then Marie Claire is going to give us some recessional music so that we can kind of dance a little as we're leaving. Okay, so uh, one of the main branches of New Thought is unity, and I like this prayer of protection from the unity branch of the family. So I'm going to say it, and if you know it, you can join me. And then I'm going to invite anybody who has friends or relations that you want to include in the energy of that prayer of protection to just speak their name. And uh, and then once all of the names, it can be simultaneous, and you don't have to explain anything. That's the great thing about healing prayers. God doesn't need to know what's wrong or exactly what the problem is. It's just we're affirming that that person will be supported in whatever it is they're needing or going through right now. And then I'll just conclude it, maybe with the chimes. And then that'll be the signal for the recessional. Okay, if you wish, you can stand if you're comfortable to do it. We can't circle, but we can stand by our chairs. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we go, God is, and all is well. Alan.